In the high, desolate heart of Wyoming, the wind at South Pass does not merely blow, it scours. In the winter of 1878, as a blizzard began to lock the land in ice, the freight wagons of Abner Cole were trapped on the exposed plain. His 20 mules, vital assets worth over $4,000, were tethered to a heavy picket line between two wagons, their backs to the screaming, ice-laden wind. Cole and his men fought the storm with the tools of convention: heavy 18-ounce canvas tarps lashed over the wagons, and secondary canvas windbreaks tied between wagon wheels. The tarps snapped like rifle reports, the sound instantly stolen by the wind. The mules, blasted by air moving at 60 miles per hour, were already coated in rime, shivering violently, burning precious energy they could not replace. 2 miles away, in a shallow depression barely noticeable on the landscape, Silas Weir's mule team was quiet. His animals were standing calmly, heads down, chewing hay in the relative silence. They were sheltered not by flapping canvas, but by low, curved walls of granite stone, hastily stacked. The wind roared a dozen feet above their heads, but in the lee of the rock, the air was almost still. Weir's method looked primitive, like the work of a child. Yet his animals were resting while Cole's were dying on their feet. What did this quiet, observant man understand about the sheer physics of moving air at 7,500 feet that decades of freighting experience had failed to teach men like Abner Cole? The year was 1878. South Pass, Wyoming, was no longer the primary gateway for pioneers bound for Oregon. That stream had slowed to a trickle. It was now a critical, high-altitude bottleneck for freight and communication, connecting the Union Pacific Railroad towns to the south with the burgeoning mining camps and military posts to the north. At an elevation of 7,550 feet, the pass was a vast, open saddle of sagebrush and granite, high above the timberline. The defining feature of this landscape was not the snow, though it fell deep, nor the cold, though it was lethal. It was the wind. This was a place where the wind blew relentlessly, an atmospheric river of cold air funneled by the Rocky Mountains. The U.S. Army Quartermaster's Field Guide, the Bible for anyone moving freight in the West, offered specific instructions for encampment in extreme weather. It detailed the proper method for securing wagons, the specification for rope tethers, and the use of heavy canvas covers. Conventional wisdom, practiced by veteran freighters like Abner Cole, dictated that you met the wind with brute force: heavier tarps, thicker ropes, stronger wagons. The accepted method was to form a corral, or a straight wagon line, to present a flat, heavy barrier. The belief was that strength and mass were the only defense. The manual spoke of material resistance, not aerodynamic theory. They taught men how to tie knots that wouldn't slip, but not where to position the knot so it wouldn't be tested at all. The failure of this conventional method was predictable, costly, and brutal. Let us examine the case of Abner Cole's outfit, a standard operation for the time. Cole was hauling mining equipment, a total of 18,000 pounds distributed across 3 heavy freight wagons, pulled by a team of 20 large mules. When the storm hit, Cole, following the manual, ordered his wagons pulled into a straight line, broadside to the prevailing wind. He intended this to be a wall. He then stretched a picket line for his mules in the lee of the wagons. His men then fought to erect 10-foot-tall canvas barriers between the wagons. The problems began immediately. First, a broadside wagon presents a 12-foot-high, 20-foot-long solid object. The wind, striking this barrier at 60 miles per hour, does not stop. It accelerates, curling over the top and slamming down just behind it. This zone, the lee, which Cole assumed would be calm, became a vortex of vicious, downward-plunging turbulence. His mules, tethered in this exact zone, were subjected to buffeting winds even more chaotic than the open plain. Second, the canvas. An 18-ounce canvas tarp, 20 feet by 30 feet, weighs nearly 100 pounds. In a 60-mile-per-hour wind, it exerts thousands of pounds of force. The grommets tore out first, the canvas then shredded, with a sound like tearing cloth amplified 1,000 times. Within an hour, Cole had lost $150 in canvas, which was now just frozen rags snapping in the dark. The mules, unable to find calm, unable to rest, refused to eat. Their body heat was stripped away by a wind chill that drove the effective temperature to nearly 70 degrees below zero. They were losing the battle for survival, pound by pound, degree by degree. Silas Weir was not a freighter by trade. He was a stonemason, born in the Orkney Islands of Scotland. He had spent his youth not on the plains, but on wind-swept, treeless islands where building dry-stained dikes was an art of survival. He had learned from his father that a solid wall was a fool's wall. A solid wall, he was taught, creates a doubled wind, a violent tumbling eddy on its lee side that would flatten crops and distress livestock. The Orkney shepherds knew that a porous wall, one with small gaps between the stones, did not block the wind, but filtered it. It combed the wind, slowing it down, creating a deep, gentle pocket of calm that extended far behind it. Weir had also learned about geometry. He never built a straight wall if he could build a curve. The curve, he knew, deflected the main force of the wind, encouraging it to slide around the shelter, rather than piling up against it. He had come to America seeking work, found himself in the Wyoming high country, and recognized the wind of his homeland. He was employed as a swamper, a freighter's assistant, but he observed. He watched men like Cole fight the wind with canvas, and he saw its folly. He was a quiet man, and his preparations were often met with mockery. As other men repaired their wagons, Weir would spend hours walking the ground at a potential campsite, reading the land, before he began his strange, slow work of piling rocks. The first time Weir was in charge of his own small team, he put his theory into practice. It was a cold autumn evening at a known layover near the Sweetwater River. A storm was imminent. Weir could feel the pressure change and saw the high, fast-moving cirrus clouds. The other freighters, including Abner Cole, made for the standard campsite, a flat, open area. Weir took his wagon and 4 mules half a mile away into a shallow depression scattered with granite boulders, while the other men wrestled with canvas and pounded picket stakes into the freezing ground. Weir unhitched his mules and began to work. He was not building a house. He was building a dike. He chose a large existing boulder as his anchor and began to build a low, C-shaped wall of dry stacked stone. He worked quickly, lifting and placing 50-pound, 100-pound rocks. The wall was only 4 feet high. It looked laughably small. It was perhaps 30 feet long, and the curve was shallow. To Abner Cole, stopping by on horseback, it looked like a waste of time. "You aim to stop a Wyoming norther with a pile of pebbles, Weir?" he shouted over the rising wind. Weir just nodded, not bothering to explain. He finished his wall, cleared the snow from the ground inside the curve, and parked his wagon parallel to it, creating a small, enclosed space. Then he fed his mules. The wall was too low to be a barrier, too porous to be a shelter. It looked, as Cole remarked to his men, like an Indian grave. The conflict was one of fundamental philosophy. The conventional wisdom, embodied by Abner Cole and the Army manuals, was a philosophy of confrontation. It believed survival was a matter of material strength. If a 12-ounce canvas rips, use an 18-ounce. If a rope breaks, use a thicker one. It was a Newtonian worldview of force meeting opposing force. This method was expensive, loud, and in the end, brittle. It required massive inputs of energy and resources, heavy materials, constant repair, and exhausted men. It treated the wind as a solid enemy that must be stopped at a boundary. Silas Weir's philosophy was one of aerodynamics and deflection. He treated the wind as a fluid, a powerful river that could not be dammed, only persuaded. His goal was not to stop the wind, but to lift it, to comb it, to guide it over and around his shelter. He understood a principle that veteran freighters missed. The most violent part of the wind is not the wind itself, but the turbulence created when it hits a solid object. His low, porous, curved wall was designed to create a pressure shadow, a bubble of high-pressure, slow-moving air. It was a battle of geometry versus mass, of intelligence versus brute strength. The first results were measured not by Weir, but by an impartial technical observer. Major Elias Thorne of the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers was also caught at South Pass, tasked with surveying a potential route for a military telegraph line. Thorne was a man of instruments, carrying a pocket anemometer and a mercury thermometer in his kit. He was camping with Cole's outfit, as it was the larger, professional operation. As the moderate storm set in on the first night, Thorne took readings. His logbook entry, dated November 14, 1878, was precise. 8:10 p.m. Ambient temperature 12 degrees Fahrenheit. Wind speed 35 mph sustained. Calculated wind chill 20 degrees Fahrenheit. Thorne then moved into the lee of Cole's wagon line. 9:09 p.m. Within wagon line shelter, wind speed 20 to 25 mph. Extreme turbulence and vertical downdrafts. Animals agitated. Curious about the Scotchman's folly, Thorne walked the 2 miles to Weir's camp. The change was immediate and shocking. As he approached the low stone wall, the wind roar in his ears diminished. He stepped inside the C-shape. His log entry, 9:30 p.m. Within Weir's stone enclosure. Wind speed, 5.8 mph. Light air. Temperature, 14 degrees Celsius. Animals are at rest. The effect is remarkable. The structure lifts the wind rather than blocking it. Thorne, a man of calculations, estimated that Weir's mules were spending 80% less metabolic energy on simple thermoregulation than Cole's. Weir's system was an elegant, multi-layered defense. It was not just the wall. Layer 1 was sighting. Weir chose a shallow depression, using the earth itself as his primary windbreak, gaining 2 or 3 feet of protection before he laid a single stone. Layer 2 was conduction. He cleared the snow cover from the ground inside his shelter. Snow is an insulator, and at 7,500 feet, the ground, even in winter, holds residual heat. By clearing the snow, he allowed his mules to stand on bare, frozen dirt, which was a constant 20 degrees Fahrenheit, rather than on snow, which was 12 degrees Fahrenheit. It was a marginal gain, but not a trivial one. Layer 3 was the wall itself, the technical heart of the system. It was dry-stacked, meaning the gaps between the rocks were essential. These gaps, 10–15% of the total surface area, allowed a small, controlled amount of air to pass through. This bleeding of air prevented the formation of a vacuum on the lee side, which is what causes the violent, curling turbulence behind a solid wall. The wall filtered the wind, creating a deep pocket of calm. The curve, a gentle 30-degree arc, ensured that any wind striking it was deflected laterally, spending its energy harmlessly on the open plain. Layer 4 was the roof. Weir parked his wagon parallel to the wall, about 12 feet back. He then stretched a single light canvas from the wagon box to the top of the stone wall, creating a low-angled shed roof. This canvas was not a windbreak. The wall had already done that work. The roof's job was to block radiative heat loss, to stop the mule's body heat from escaping to the clear, cold sky, and to prevent snow from drifting in. The system was a masterpiece of low-tech, high-efficiency engineering. The true test came 2 days later. The moderate storm was merely the precursor to a full-blown blizzard, one that would be remembered as the South Pass Cataclysm. The temperature plunged to 25 degrees below zero. The wind, a sustained 70 miles per hour with gusts measured by Thorne, before his anemometer froze, at over 90 psi, was a physical wall of ice particles. The world was reduced to a roaring white void. In Abner Cole's camp, the situation became a catastrophe. The wagon line, which had been a poor shelter, was now a liability. The wind-driven snow, or snaw, as Weir would call it, was finer than dust. It found every crack. The vortexes created by the wagons became snow sinks, and the mules were buried in drifts while still on their feet. 2 mules, mad with cold and terror, snapped their tethers and vanished into the whiteout, found weeks later, frozen solid. Cole and his men abandoned their wagons and dug a desperate snow cave, huddling for 48 hours. They lost 8 of their 20 mules to exposure. The cost, over $1,600 in livestock alone, was ruinous. In Silas Weir's camp, The sound was terrifying. The wind overhead shrieked like a train, but inside, the system performed flawlessly. The low wall, now partially buried, created its pocket of calm. The angled canvas roof, taut and steep, caused the wind to accelerate as it passed over, scouring the snow off the roof, rather than letting it accumulate. Major Thorne, Weir, and Weir's assistant huddled near the mules for warmth. The animals were standing, heads down, protected, consuming the hay that would fuel their internal furnaces. Thorne's thermometer, tucked inside his coat, read 10 degrees Chauve. The differential between the inside of the shelter and the outside was an astonishing 35 degrees, not counting the wind chill. They survived the 48-hour peak of the storm in relative safety, their animals intact. When the wind finally subsided, the landscape was post-apocalyptic. It was a world of brilliant white and blue, scarred by the carcasses of frozen livestock and the wreckage of canvas. Abner Cole and his surviving men, frostbitten and defeated, stumbled toward the smoke from Weir's chimney pipe. They found Weir and Thorne already at work, calmly digging out the wagon. Cole's remaining 12 mules were brought into Weir's shelter, which was now overcrowded. This created a new technical problem: humidity. The breath from 24 mules and 4 men began to fog the air, freezing instantly on every surface. This high humidity, 10-degree type air, was deadly, capable of freezing lungs. Weir, observing this, took his hammer and coolly knocked 2 stones from the top of the lee side of his wall. Hot, moist air rose. The cold, dry wind passing over the walls outside created a pressure differential, siphoning the moist air out through the new vents, while not creating a draft on the animals below. It was an instinctive, brilliant piece of ventilation management. Cole, the skeptic, watched in silence, his education complete. The diffusion of the idea was rapid and absolute. Major Elias Thorne's official report to the quartermaster at Fort Bridger was a sensation, not for its drama, but for its data. Report on field expedients for animal survival contained precise diagrams of Weir's wall, the C-curve, the 4-foot height, the 10-15% porosity. It compared the statistics. Cole's outfit, using regulation methods, suffered a 40% loss of livestock. Other outfits trapped in the open suffered 80-100% losses. Weir's outfit suffered 0%. The Army, a practical organization, adopted the Weir windbreak into its field manuals by 1880. The effect was immediate. Freighting companies began issuing instructions to their teamsters, not for more canvas, but for less. They mandated that drivers arrive at layovers with sufficient daylight to erect stone or sod wall windbreaks before tending to any other duty. The stage stations at South Pass and along the High Plains routes began building permanent Weir walls, C-shaped stone enclosures that became a standard life-saving feature of the high-altitude landscape. Today, the great freight wagons are gone from South Pass, but if you walk the high ridges, you can still find them. Low, lichen-covered curves of granite, half buried in sagebrush, stand as monuments to a forgotten piece of engineering. They are the legacy of Silas Weir. He had proven a fundamental truth that the high, cold deserts teach. Survival is not a matter of strength, but of intelligence. It is not about confronting the elements, but about understanding them. The lesson of the rock windbreak was not that a wall could stop the wind. The lesson was that the right kind of wall, porous, low, and curved, could persuade the wind to lift, to part, and to pass by, leaving a small vital pocket of calm in the heart of the storm.